Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about agile development. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, I've heard so many people complain about agile and that they never do it correctly. How are you supposed to work in an agile fashion? So the short answer is you need to have an incremental mindset, but still abide by the restrictions of this industry. What do I mean by that? Oh, well, I'm glad that you asked. What I mean by that is that the fanatics, the true fanatics of agile development are people who will claim that things such as estimations don't need a time. They claim that you should be able to buckle down and just create a backlog of, say, a sprint or something like that. And at no point should you disturb people during that time. And you should be able to have a continuous communication process with your stakeholders in order to deliver on something. So the reason why this doesn't work is because this is pretty much only beneficial from the perspective of the developing team. That's what it is. There is no benefit at all for a stakeholder to hear that, oh no, well, we estimated this store to a 5 or an 8. What does that even mean? Unless you actually have a way of figuring out how, because that's what the information that we want is, how long is this going to take? Because every single damn company, person, customer, call it whatever you want, on this planet wants a waterfall solution. They want to know what it's going to cost and when they can get it. And then they want all of that to meet their expectations. The reason why we can't work in that way is because it's fucking hard to get all of those three things correct. It's almost impossible. That is why we're trying to figure out new ways of doing things so that we can give you something like that without abiding to all of these limitations. It's actually very similar to trying to lose weight in the fitness world today, where everybody's kind of aligned on that calories does have a factor in how much how fat you are. And most of the dieting fads out there are just trying to shuffle around different concepts to try to actually get you to eat less of them or to burn more of them. That's what most of this is about. This is exactly the same thing what we're doing in agile and the different ways of doing agile. So the reason why this keeps on failing, or why people feel that it keeps on failing, is because it assumes a few things. It assumes that you, just as an example, it assumes that your customer is open to the idea that they need to be involved at every step of the process in order to get what they ordered, when in reality what's going to happen is that they might be open to that, but it's actually also going to slow you down, because if you need to synchronize with your customer, which you should, I'm not saying that you shouldn't, I'm just saying that you should think of a cooperation between two different organizations as something that just by having that cooperation is going to delay the delivery speed. It's inevitable, because the more people that you have that especially are not committed or invested in the internal workings of your company, well, they're going to have to schedule things, they're going to have to book meetings, they're going to have to be available and so forth. And I can tell you from quite a lot of experience with collaborating with an organization that is vastly different from your own, how slow that process can be. I can only imagine how much faster I would have delivered, or my team would have delivered on multiple stories if we were allowed to work completely autonomously without having to have a stakeholder that was needed to be synchronized across the board every single time. But it's a double-edged sword, because if you don't do the synchronization, you might actually build the incorrect thing. And this is a big problem. The same thing goes with this idea of sprints. So it's kind of cute, because a sprint is literally the most pointless thing, more or less, that you can have. Just like it's a nice ambition. I'm not saying that it's pointless per se. I'm just saying that It's a nice thought, but the reality is always going to be this. And this is the same thing when you plan a quarter, if you're doing OKRs, whatever the hell you're doing, any type of planning you're doing, you can always assume this one thing. And that is, as soon as the sales representative walks into that door and says, hey guys, I just signed this new big customer, we need to get on this, that the whole plan that you have, you can throw that right out of the fucking window. The same second that happens, because now you have new priorities. And this is the problem with deciding that, oh no, we're going to commit to this, we're going to do this thing and only this thing. That's not how it works, guys. This is not how the open market works. It's a dynamic shifting environment, and you need to be able to adjust pretty much on the same day into a new way of doing things, unless for some reason that the thing that came in isn't important enough so that it warrants you switching focus from the sprint that you already have. But developers, sometimes they just don't get this. I've seen it many times, especially the idealists of us, who just talk as this idea of being a scrum master or whatever they are is more important than actually doing, like, that the principles are more important and abiding by those principles rather than actually doing the thing that you're there to do. They kind of, it's like they got lost in the woods somewhere, where they are now more about the philosophy and doing things in a correct manner or in line with some ideology rather than delivering value to the business, which is the whole point. The whole thing exists to do that thing. So yeah, it's hard, because what usually happens is that they claim that, oh yeah, but you know, if we were just die hard enough about Scrum or Agile and so forth, it would work out in the end. But now that we broke it, that's why people are unhappy. No, it's not, guys, it's not. So the way that we need to rethink this, if you ask me personally, because this is, I will admit, a very, very hard problem to solve. The way that this needs to be adjusted in order for it to work is that you need to have this idea that you're always working in an MVP fashion, but the MVP does not mean shitty product. You have to have a short-term vision and a long-term vision. The long-term vision is the most important thing for you to have. It is the thing that you need to define first, because you can look at it, the best analogy that I can give you is that it's very similar, like software development and doing things on a project that spans quite a lot of time is very similar to sailing. Now, when you sail, you are not going to be able to say, I'm just going to have this exact bearing for the entire journey. I'm just going to go in a straight line all the way to that island over there that I'm going to. It's not possible. What actually happens is that things change. The waves are going to move your boat, the winds will be different, so you may need to get a bearing and then use the wind just in different manners. You actually zigzag for the most part in order to get where you want. And that is exactly the mental picture that I want you to have when we're talking about how to do Agile in a correct fashion. You're still heading towards the island. You know where the island is. You know what it looks like. You know exactly what you want from this journey. You have already decided. You may not know exactly where on the island you're going to hit, but you're going to adjust so that you hit the mark as best as you can. But you know where it is, and you know exactly how to get there. Now you need to think about where each bearing or what each step of that process is going to look like, and you need to work in an incremental fashion in order to achieve this goal. So you basically have this idea that you create the most valuable thing, or rather the minimum viable thing, the smallest thing that you can make that still produces a tangible value. It's not, I'm not saying that if you're gonna make a logging page that the first thing you ship is a button on a page. No. What you might ship the first thing is just a basic design with a login form that actually allows you to go into the application. You ship that even though your designers are gonna hate you for it and your so forth because they want everything to look perfect. You still ship it because now the functionality is actually there. It unblocks other people from actually using the experience, and then you can kind of build on top of that, right? So by doing this every step of the way, you have this, you don't commit yourself to doing much more than just delivering the smallest thing on each iteration that still produces some type of value. And this idea of taking just one step all the time like this is perfect, because that means that if you just take one step and something changes, well, then you take a step to the left, and then you step to the right, and then another thing changes, and then you take a left again, and then you continue until you can kind of see that, okay, now we have kind of figured out all of these deviations, and all these discoveries that we've made have kind of adjusted our course a little bit, but we still know where the island is. Okay, so this was not necessarily planned for, but if we just continue this fashion, we will still reach the island. And that is definitely, in my opinion, the thing that needs to happen in order for Agile to work. But this idea of having just like a sprint, or having some type of decision that where you abide by some philosophy in order to pretty much, if your idea of doing Agile development is that it's more important that these practices are abided by than it is to actually find out how to fit these practices into your business, then you're doing it in the incorrect fashion. So what I want you to take away from this is that I believe that quite a lot of people argue that Agile development doesn't work all that well is because the fundamental way that most people want a product or a service or anything to work is that I pay you, you tell me, or rather you tell me how much it costs, I pay you, and then I get the thing at the end. That's how everybody wants it to work, and the closer you can get to something like that is truly smooth and a really nice experience, the better. Agile development is developed in order to be able to do this. So if you have this restriction, you have to know that people want to know when things are going to be done. You can throw magic numbers and use your estimation cards as much as you want, but at the end of the day, they're still going to want to know what the deadline is. And you need to derive that in some fashion. There are many ways to do this, but you still need to tell them when it's going to be done. Same thing with sprinting. If you have this idea that, oh, we're just going to commit to this sort of work and so forth, and then nothing can change, you're kidding yourself, because reality is that anybody can at any point come in and say, this has now lower priority than this thing here. So what you're doing is that you're playing a mental game for your own sake, and that's great. If you like it, then go for it, but you should be aware of that it could change at any moment. So what I argue is that if you have a long-term vision, an island to sail towards, then it doesn't really matter all that much that you deviate with your boat a little bit here and there, as long as you have a very clear direction. And then you take small steps. Minimum viable product, not shit code, a good thing, something that is actually useful, well written, but the smallest thing that you can deliver that still produces some type of value. And from there, your processes should evolve fairly naturally. Have a great day.